today, we'll say, Mother Nature was not on our side. We were all a little wet, but it was fine. There were tents everywhere. So we survived, we persevered. The good thing is the jumpies were not up until the third session, so they dried out a little bit. The older kids were the oldest group, was the first set to go down them. So we made the oldest group, yours is not in the oldest group. We had the oldest group go and kind of dry it off their bigger bodies, you know. So I think everybody had a lot of fun. And then after the presentation here, you're going to go out, you're going to grab a balloon. We're going to hook you up with your camper. And we're going to go out this way for a balloon release. So, and then we'll all participate in that, and then I'll have you sign out your camper. They'll get anything that they left out here to dry, and then you know you're free to go. But thank you so much for letting us spend this time with your campers. We really appreciate it, and I am so excited because I have this presentation to offer you, and I would like to introduce Carla Nelson, and she's from Thrive Counseling, and she has an amazing presentation for you.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
You guys are all here. As Sherry said, I'm Carla. I am a child therapist. I currently work at a child specialty private practice in Kennesaw, and we do support children going through the grieving process, and so it was so wonderful. When I came here, this camp is so amazing, so I'm so glad that your children are able to participate in that. And the goal for today is just, I have a PowerPoint that unfortunately we couldn't get the projector to work with us, so we're just going to go through it. But the goal is to offer new ways to support your child through this, as well as answer any specific questions you have about your child, and kind of let you know how the different developmental stages can affect what you're seeing in your child. So I want to be able, just because I'm not sure how old your children are, to kind of navigate you through how it can look differently for children depending on their age. So we'll first kind of get into that. If you have any questions as we're going, just raise your hand, let me know, and I'll stop. You'll also see that I've provided information on our center, so if you have any questions at the end, you want to know about, how to get your child set up, I'd be happy to answer those questions. Okay, so first we're going to look at the ages birth to 2 years. A lot of times I think as adults we may not see that the children are affected right away because they don't have the words to communicate their feelings yet. And so it's easy to think, oh, they're not quite so much affected. But what children that age do pick up on is the change in routine at home, the change in the family's emotions, and so they do take that in. You'll see them become more dysregulated, more crying, more, thrashing, and just more, it can't even at 2 be those tantrums that you see. So they really do pick up on that. So the way to ease that anxiety for children is to try as much as possible to keep that consistent routine for them, so that they know what to expect, keeping that connection and that physical contact so their basic needs are being met is really important. So that's kind of what you're seeing from birth to 2 years. Does anyone have a child that's of that age in here? Okay.
What did you mean when you said thrashing?
Just kind of like when you put them down, like not willing to go down, so kind of looking back and just, kind of not willing to be self-soothed or to be soothed, if that makes sense. Good question. So looking then at ages 3 to 5, we go to that next age group. And here at this age, we're seeing children not really understanding the finality of death. And so maybe they're thinking the parent or relative that's deceased has gone on a trip or they're sleeping. And so going through that process is really, it's difficult for them to understand where that parent or relative is. I know I worked with a child who, you can see some magical thinking going on, and so I worked with a child who was 4, and they thought that they could take their parents' clothing and take it outside, and just as you would water a plant or a flower to grow, that they could get their parent back that way. So you may see more things like that with this age, where they're just figure out, how they can get that parent or relative to come back. And so with this age group, it's really important to empathize with their needs. And so if they're telling you that they're scared, if they're telling you that they're scared where their parent is, that you're saying, I know this is scary, I know there's a lot of changes going on, but that you're safe and I'm here to take care of you. Kind of reiterating that to them is really important. It's also difficult, again, since they're kind of learning that object permanence, so they know that usually if something goes away, it comes back. So they're starting to understand that concept. So when death happens, it's very confusing. Again, because they're thinking they're going to come back, they're just sleeping. So a way to simply and developmentally and appropriately answer those questions is to let the child know, just as flowers, when plants or flowers die, they don't bloom anymore, they don't grow anymore. When the dog passes away, they won't bark, they won't play anymore, so that they can kind of understand that there is that permanent factor, so they don't get stuck in the denial stage of grief, which we'll kind of talk about too. Does anyone have any questions about that age group? Okay. So then we move on to 6 to 8 years, and here we're going to see where maybe anger is coming out a bit more. It doesn't mean that it's not coming out in the earlier stages, but we're going to see where there's a lot more feelings of trying to figure out, what's happened. They may be more interested in death at this stage, so kind of curious about how things die and what happens after you die. So an important thing with this age, and even if you have a 4 or 5-year-old that's demonstrating anger, give them a way to physically release that anger. So give them a healthy way, a healthy outlet. So whether that's giving them a squishy softball to throw against the door, the wall, that's not going to harm anything, whether that's having them rip up paper, and have them do it over a trash can so it doesn't cause a huge mess. It's those physical ways of releasing the anger in a healthy way, so it's not hitting others. And then give them some relaxation and coping skills to relax, to kind of decompress after that. So for kids, it's different. If your child loves music, a lullaby, some music to help calm them. It might just be the closeness that you have with them, so wrapping them up in a blanket and having that moment. It can be sensory for them, so playing with Play-Doh, something to kind of help calm them and help soothe them. So that's just something that can be helpful when they're going through that anger, which is very understandable. Okay, we will move on. We have more of the adolescent years, the 9 to 12. And at this age, they are more aware of death, and so maybe there's more fears of the other parent or another relative dying. They're very aware of that at this age. They're aware that it's final. They also might have guilt of things that they wish they had said. And so helping them kind of process all that, there also might be some aggression that accompanies that. So throwing objects when they're angry, it may become more physical at that point. We'll see it affecting school, concentration difficulties, things of that nature. They also might try to hide their feelings more at this age. So just if, pass this back. Sorry. Oh, you're fine. So there may be more resistance to talking at this point. And so it's also kind of meeting your child where they are and kind of letting them choose how they want to participate in the death and in the mourning process. Any questions on that age group at all?
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Is this like initially when this happens in these age groups, or is this, we're 2.5 years out?
Yeah. No, it can
It's
be.
all cycling around.
It is. It's all a cycle. It's never, linear where things hit. And you'll see, we're kind of going to go over the stages of grief too, and it's the same with that.
I know that they cycle, but I guess
Sure, yeah.
because, they were in different age groups, obviously,
Sure.
that I'm starting to
I
see.
see what you're saying. Sure. Yes, I think as your child gets older, you will start to see exactly. So if it happened 2.5 years ago, and then you're noticing they're hitting a new age group, you'll start to see maybe some of the newer symptoms because it's developmental, and so it's also kind of how cognitively they're processing it. So that's a great question. And so as we move on to the teenage years, we're going to have a lot more of lot more fighting, yelling, screaming, trying to get, their frustrations across. And so also at this age, and even in 9 to 12, it's important maybe to start seeking camps like this. Obviously, support peer groups for the child so that they kind of understand they're not alone and they understand that they're not the only one that's going through this process. It can be really helpful. Any questions about the teenage group? Okay. So now we'll kind of get into the grief stages, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. So we're kind of going to go through it and tailor it more towards how it affects children. So again, there's 5 stages of grief, and the stages are where you can skip a stage, you can go back to a stage, and so as we were saying, you can, cycle around. It's not that you have to hit every step. The denial phase is obviously, why me type of thing, no, not me. In this stage, we want to make sure that we're answering questions to the child. It will depend on their age. But we're looking for explaining death so that they understand that they're not confused that the parent may be coming back. Because this is the child who stands by the door saying, I'm waiting for mom to come back, and, they won't be coming back. So it's in that denial phase of, I don't believe that this is happening. And so at that point, it's really important to answer appropriately and help them understand, when someone passes away, when someone dies, they're not breathing anymore, they're not talking anymore, they're not eating anymore, and I know that can sound very scary to have to read sometimes, but in that we don't want them to get stuck in that stage of thinking that we'll come back. Okay. So the anchor, that is a stage obviously that will come up. Abandonment feelings may come up, and so again, trying to make sure that your child feels as much as they can routine and closeness to you and that physical contact and love. Also, common, to an extent, common sense, but obviously this affects the whole family. So as much as you can, making sure you yourself as a parent or as a relative who's dealing with this child grieving as well, that you're getting help through your grief process, because that's something obviously that you would need support with as well. So just keeping that in mind, because I can understand it would be hard to kind of move on and get used to that routine and that new normal, and so it's important for you to be able to get support that you need as well. So the bargaining stage is again, maybe trying to bargain with God. The child may, say, if so-and-so comes back, I promise I'll be good. And so again, we want to make sure that they're not feeling that they're bad in any way for the deceased person passing away. So depression in children can look different than depression in adults. So we're wanting to look for things like sleep difficulties, and that can look like not being able to get enough sleep, or not being able to sleep well, or getting too much sleep, coming home from school, wanting to go to sleep. It's that decreased interest in things that they used to find joy in. So if you're noticing they don't want to go play with friends, they don't enjoy that activity they used to enjoy, those are signs of depression and signs that, maybe they kind of need a support system, maybe even seeking counseling, counseling professional. Obviously, if there's any self-harm, any risk of feeling like the child could be suicidal, and that's a really important time to seek someone who can help with that piece of it, because that is something that can obviously come up. And in older children, alcohol and drug abuse. So for me, the really big red flags are, self-harming behaviors, suicidal thoughts, turning to drugs and alcohol, to where you really need to be getting to talk to someone to see if the child needs more support and needs to be in counseling to kind of work through those things. And then the acceptance piece is obviously pretty self-explanatory. They get to that point where they're able to accept it was nothing that they did, they didn't do anything wrong, they can kind of get through through that anger and depression stage, and so they're feeling that they can kind of start that new normal, and they'll start to enjoy the activities that they used to enjoy. Does anyone have questions about the stages at all? Okay. Yes.
It was kind of similar to her question. I know you see these different stages. Can they be reoccurring? Can they go through like, anger, depression, denial, bargaining, and accept it, and then go back to those same feelings?
They can. I think a main thing that can happen is when something triggers that. So, if an anniversary comes up, if their birthday comes up, if something that reminds them where it's more of a major trigger for them, then it can start again. But hopefully they gain some coping skills, they gain some things, whether it's through counseling or through support that you sought, information that you had, you'll see it get better. And so hopefully it shouldn't get back to that point of
Like depression or anything?
right.
I have a question. What is the length of the process, the normal grieving process?
Yeah, there is a one.
I
Yeah,
was told myself that 6 months was something, that it was normal. If I keep being depressed after 6 months, I should search for professional help. And because that was the kind of average of it takes to keep on with your life without that deep depression or sadness or the crying or the crisis. And if that lasts longer than 6 months, it's better to seek for professional depression. So
I will answer it this way.
professional help.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. There isn't a time frame here. We can't say that 6 months is when you should be feeling better, when you should be moving on. I don't know if I can't speak for what you were told. I do think if you're noticing that over time your depression is getting worse and you feel like it's getting deeper and deeper, or your child's depression is getting to the point where you're seeing more suicidal thoughts, maybe don't want to engage in activities, then I think it's looking at maybe if that's within the first few weeks and then you're seeing it get worse, then you want to see counseling, because it sounded like you were kind of saying you were told at 6 months if it's still going you should see it. I can't really say and agree with that because everyone has an individual time frame. There will be and personally I think grief it's ongoing.
But for some after 5 years, if you keep crying for the same thing, it's like maybe there's something else.
But I do
It's
agree
5 years.
I do agree you should find those red flags is what I like to call them, where if it's affecting your daily functioning or it's affecting your child's daily functioning, then yes, that's probably time to figure out, counseling, support, and based on your beliefs, medication to help, those types of things. So I would say there is a time frame in where you're seeing those symptoms within yourself or your child and it's not getting better over the first few weeks, then it would be time to seek professional counseling. Because it shouldn't be left
And it's not
untreated.
related necessarily to the loss of remorse.
Right.
It would be something else.
Right. But to just kind of say, in general, it's not saying in a year you should, feel better, be better, that type of thing. It's just not realistic, and everyone will have their different ways of coping, obviously. I wanted to give you guys some resources of things that you can do with your children, things that you may have already done. I have an example specifically that I printed out, but there's also 2 others that are on the website I gave you. And if any of you are having trouble reading that website, I can write it out for you or spell it because I realize it's pretty small. So the one that I printed out is the caring cards, and this can be used for every age group. It's Sesame Street, so it looks like more kid-friendly, child-friendly, but you can kind of just go through it and not show your teenager the Sesame Street piece of it and do those activities with them. And then there's also the feelings journal. That is all found on the Sesame Street Grief program, but again, you can tailor it to older children and teens. The feelings journal is just kind of maybe having a daily check-in with your child. Today I feel, one hard thing about today was, one good thing about today was, and so it's just kind of getting into a routine of checking in with them. And then like a memory chain can be done where on pieces of paper you can write, favorite memories, memories that we have, kind of keep adding to it. And so that's a way for the child or the teenager to kind of get out those things and have something that they can actually have that has the memories on it. And then another great website and resource is thechildbrief.org. They have different pages for your child, for your teen. It lets you know how to answer questions that are difficult to answer. I welcome you all if you have any specific questions. I will be happy to answer those today. But it's helpful sometimes to know what is a helpful response, what's unhelpful. It's hard to know in the moment when your child's asking you something. So those resources are available to you. And we have I gave you a few different handouts with our information on it. So if you ever want to stop by, have a tour, if you feel that your child is maybe in need of some more support, we are looking to, as a needs basis, we can start a grief support group, and depending on, we obviously do that for different age groups and things like that, but just something to keep in mind if you're wanting your child to have more support that way. That'll be something that we're, as the new year comes, we are kind of planning and seeing what the need is for that. So I think that ends with this piece today. Does anyone have any other specific concerns or questions for me? You guys asked really good questions, so I appreciate you letting me speak, and I'm so glad again. I think this